Hi, I'm Andrea. I live in Warwickshire and I'm a foster carer. I foster Muslim unaccompanied asylum-seeking young people. I converted to Islam 10 years ago now, and it is through my job of fostering that I had to learn about Islam to facilitate better care for the unaccompanied asylum-seeking children I was looking after, who predominantly came from Muslim countries. So I researched around. I knew nothing of Islam beforehand, and I just researched. And as I had the boys in my home and they grew and learned to speak English, etc., clearly they would have conversations with me and help me with my learning of Islam, so I could help them with no thought whatsoever of converting to Islam, just really giving the best possible care. There are a few moments in caring for them that helped consolidate my thinking around Islam and the fact that there is one God, and I always call it an inshallah moment when one of the young people told a not a very nice story and some difficulties he's had on his journey over to the UK. I just sort of said, well, what were you thinking? Why did you do that? Why did you put yourself in this dangerous place? And he just sat there and went, inshallah. Wow, what a magic word. That seemed great for the situation he'd popped himself into, and that's all he had to do, say that word. And so then on, instead of researching the basics of Islam, etc., I did Google inshallah, and it led me to, if you like, the spiritual, internal stuff of Islam, and that reliance and handhold to Allah. And those young people left. I got other foster children who weren't Muslim, and there was something big missing from my life. And as I walked through Birmingham city centre, I saw a dawah table, went across, was telling my story a bit like I'm telling you today, and they said I was doing all the right stuff but wasn't being rewarded for it, or words to that effect. It sounds a bit like a threat when I say that out loud. And so I sort of thought about that. I knew, I believed that there was only one God. I understood that Muhammad was the last and final prophet, peace be upon him. That was my shahadah then, wasn't it? So at that table, I said my shahadah, and I thought I'd be a bit clever with that. Come out to them, as you say, after a year. And what I thought I'd do was practice my prayers, fit my prayers into my daily life without them noticing. If I went to Muslim events, I wore my hijab, but I took it off when I came back to the small town that I live in. This didn't exactly go to plan, because I also realized that I needed to change my will, because clearly if anything had happened to me, I would probably have been cremated. So I changed my will to be the first line, please bury me according to Islamic custom. So I thought that was all right until one of my birth children picked up the document and read that first line. So, what does this mean? So I called my two sons to be with my daughter. Just a very casual moment. My daughter had said, I knew it. I knew you would do that. You're all very happy and very nice. And I told my sons, and they were okay with it as well. They knew how much I had loved looking after the Muslim boys, etc., and learning about Islam. So my birth children, that was great. I did tell them I hadn't particularly told anybody else, but within weeks, I told my best friend, whom I was going to be a bridesmaid with a very, very sexy dress. Bless her. She went out and changed all the bridesmaids' dresses to something more modest. Alhamdulillah. But best friend, she's no Muslim as well, and still my best friend. And my mum was neither here nor there. She was pretty much, I was pretty much like her, whereby, she just does a day as it goes along. She'll vaguely know about news items and, other things that might or might not affect her life. And so, yes, she was fine with it. She always loved, she always loved this colour scarf. Bless her. My father, had many debates with him, but he was very accepting once I explained what I had learnt already. He'd always ask me questions, so I absolutely loved that. I am surrounded by lovely people who have been very accepting of me. The people within the neighbourhood that I live, if I had thought who would accept me as a Muslim and who wouldn't and who may be abusive to me, totally flipped on its head. That I would call them the more educated or academically educated people within the neighbourhood, pretty much distanced themselves from me. But they, lovely, down-to-earth people whose children had played with my children when we were little, and almost speaking over the garden fence type sort of acquaintances. They were just all okay with it, all okay with me. And to me, that was a surprise that what was allegedly the more educated and worldly people they weren't ever abusive, but they certainly made their feelings known and distanced themselves from me. I think in the beginning I did struggle for a small time with hijab. I very much owned the reasons for putting it on, so I thought, but on occasions when perhaps I wanted to dress up more or go to family parties, which of course might be predominantly non-Muslim and have other things I wish to avoid as well, that I really wanted to sort of, dress up, put a slinky dress on and things like that, shallow as it sounds. It was a struggle for me. It was a struggle for me to come to terms with that. But, as time goes on, all of that is due to more study of what hijab means and, the whole, not just the scarf, the whole thing about modesty and hijab. Once I consolidated that learning, it was that all that worry and upset went away. And upset is probably a bit of a strong word. And I guess to a degree, some people in the neighbourhood who I thought I was closer to than I was, that was upsetting. That people who I had looked up to in other areas of my life, were actually prejudiced, if not Islamophobic, actually. That's quite upsetting to know, I think. It's quite sad, really, that people, they were in positions of local council and things like that. And that began to quite worry me, really, where that stands, locally, really, and still does. No, not at all. Love it, endorse it, do videos, funnily enough, for a charity just the other day, for World Hijab Day, about, my absolute love of my scarf, my identity, the thought-provoking conversations it creates. I think that a lot of that does come from a white English face as well. Why? And it's dour almost in and of itself, isn't it, that you could sit on a train and have these conversations with people and give Islam as is Islam, which is clearly perfect, and tell the myth, isn't it, I think. So I love my hijab for that reason. And actually, I just, is it a way of life now? It's just, it's just me now. But actually, not only having struggles with non-Muslim aspects of society, but perhaps some of the cultures or places within Islam, I felt quite an outsider at time. And I actually, live full time with people who don't speak English when they first come to live with me. So it's not as though I'm uncomfortable with that. But I think we're either, as reverts, put on a pedestal, or I feel talked at like we know completely nothing about Islam. And that is great that people are trying to share their knowledge with me. But the best advice I ever got was to always go back to Quran and Sunnah, to a learned person, to consolidate whatever somebody's told you, because of the different cultures, expectations, even of your behaviour in certain settings. I think that's unique to Revert. There's a lot going on there, isn't there, to gain knowledge, be part of something, be part of the ummah, isn't it? We can struggle with. And then the fact that, we're often put on pedestals, especially by brothers, it's not helpful. Well, certainly for me, it was more about learning modesty and taming egos, or my ego. I didn't need anybody, saying, oh, I get the mashallah, we've come to Islam, but then it always becomes something else. Oh, and another struggle I always had was brothers asking me, ooh, what awful things did you used to do? What bad behaviour did you used to do? Which is highly insulting, clearly, because I might not have behaved in whatever they perceived a non-Muslim woman to behave like, and clearly insulting the rest of my family who are Muslims at the same time. I think those things really grate on me. Almost contradictory to what I've just said, that we don't know everything, but I believe we all, not in any arrogant fashion at all, but I believe that we come to Islam because we wish to, and we want to know the purity of Islam. We don't need the other cultural practices or whatever brought in. I think any reverts I know, they would say that too, that, you know, please guide us properly. Please guide us with full and right information. Because we can easily go wrong, because for myself, I've spent 47 years, perhaps very Islamic, or actually aren't too far away from Islam. You know, there are etiquettes that we need to know, and we need to know the right one. I'm doing this series because I couldn't have done it without reverts who befriended me, revert groups, places for which I know those reverts went on, do Solace, you know, bring that about. And what I also know, although all I've said appears very positive, there are some dark moments at times for reverts, and we need reverts around us to help us, and we need a broad range of people to help us through, because as reverts we've come from a very broad range of backgrounds, and so the more reverts we know, I think, or are put in touch with, you hear talking, and there's other people out there, sisters and brothers unfortunately, who have more difficult journeys to Islam and whilst in Islam, and we need people around us to help us through those things, you know, have an understanding of what it's like. I suppose with Ramadan and Eid coming up, a massive well-organised good bash would be good, but all their children to celebrate Islam, almost like putting all the reverts together, so it's like extended family, and for that to grow over the years into, you know, pockets of support, and if you like a new formed family that I quite understand, you know, that this takes resources and a lot of hard work from people. But I think those are the saddest stories I hear, not so much for myself, but, you know, I could drive off anywhere and dip into anybody's sort of Eid celebrations if I wished, but for Muslim sisters with children, it's that what can we do at Eid thing. I think that's still quite a struggle, and perhaps if their children weren't born Muslim, so to speak, they need a bit more of that to get over Christmas, if you like, to recognise the absolute necessity of celebration of Eid as opposed to Christmas. Otherwise, I think that's quite hard. I do think there's some good groups out there already for reverts, and from my perspective, I can access them quite well. But I do wonder about sisters sometimes with children, etc., how that works for them, you know, for some groups, etc. Can't fully answer the question, I feel, because I don't live in the Muslim community. I live in a small town and I have a lovely Moroccan family down the road. But, you know, greatly I'm fine, but there isn't, although there's a masjid and a growing community, well, no, actually a growing mosque full of Muslims, there's no space for any Muslim community gatherings, let alone revert. I think at times, yes, and a lot of sisters, revert sisters, do, full stop, do, and that's really sad, really sad. Yes, I have. Yeah, I was initiating colour and having difficulty in and around that. Actually, not with the processes and where to go or the financial, because I know a lot of sisters have that problem around this issue also. But I wanted to make sure that I was, if you like, Islamically correct through everything I was doing, every interaction with my husband to become my ex-husband, you know what, Islamically. I wanted to do it in the best possible ways, Islamically clearly, because that would be the best way to do it. And the sister understood this, and she spoke to me and she guided me. She clearly said, no, I'm no scholar, but if I had a bit of something I'd read around, she would clarify with me or go away and clarify things with me and reassure me that I was clearly doing everything with the best of intentions, without drama and without, you know, too much hurt and upset to anybody within this process. And the sister clearly understood that and helped me a great deal. I think I might have wobbled through the process and had a few un-Islamic dramas and fits myself had I not had her to speak to. So alhamdulillah, you know, may Allah bless her and all the sisters of Solace for all that they do. with us, because I truly recognise that not all the sisters have the non-Muslim support that I have. They suffer often more prejudice than I do, and like I said, that the help that I was given just in this one instance, I'm fully aware that there's Revert sisters out there that, you know, if it may feel that much better, and I was pretty confident, then for these other sisters, something like Solace is totally necessary and resource for that help and support. And do you know what? That connection, because living in a town with not many Muslims in it, I love going to Birmingham, sitting in the masjid coffee morning and reconnecting, hearing Alhamdulillah in conversation, etc., etc., as you sit with Muslim sisters, and does that, but does more than that, because clearly they have processes in place to help with, you know, things like colour or divorce or any other bigger struggles that Revert sisters might have. Sometimes it is just about talking, learning, and saying, oh, I can't do the scarf thing. These sisters, you know, they'll speak to you, talk to you, non-judgmental, no harshness, no, they're just so lovely. You know, they will advise from where you're at, which is paramount, I think, to keep, you know, Revert sisters growing in their being. Thank you very much for this opportunity, and I hope it helps many reverts, you know, out there, and, you know, spreads the word of the work that Solace do. Thank you very much.